Genealogist. Today we are talking about the messes in our family trees, the messes we've created, the messes that have been created by other people, and how to clean up those messes. There's a lot of them up. We're going to talk both about online trees and about Family Tree Maker and the tools available in both, and then we'll talk a little bit about how to help this place. Excuse me. With that introduction, let's go ahead and dive in. So let's talk first about some of the family trees. Excuse me. For the first one that is pretty obvious, though maybe not always obvious to us when we're researching, is that we have the wrong person in our tree. We've been chasing the wrong family tree. Sometimes it's someone with the same name, but inaccurate dates. Sometimes it's somebody with a completely wrong name. I actually had an instance this week where I was chasing down the parents of a certain individual in my tree, only to discover that his mother's first husband, excuse me, had passed away. And his mother's second husband had had some run-ins with the law, and so he had been using his own first name, but the first husband's last name, and that's how they'd shown up as a family in the 1930 census. And so I didn't even know there was a second husband, had made the assumption that the first husband, that this was the husband or the father of all these children, and off I went trying to figure out why I kept hitting a brick wall when I was looking for this person who really didn't even exist. So just a simple example of some ways in which that occurs. Another error that occurs, and this occurs I think far more commonly, is that we've got the wrong dates or the wrong locations entered for people in our tree. Sometimes it's because somewhere along the line somebody made an estimate based on the information available to them at the time. It's because we type it wrong. I do that all the time. Sometimes I'll just accidentally type, 1800 instead of 1700, or start typing and in the new type ahead system with the new geographic tools available to us, sometimes I'll just accidentally hit tab or click on the wrong location, and then it gets entered into my tree. And so that does occur. Sometimes that information just gets entered incorrectly, whether intentionally or unintentionally, it doesn't matter. But the problem is that it causes brick walls in our family research. It often causes confusion. And one of the most embarrassing things, at least for me, is that when people come to look at my tree and they see stuff that's so blatantly wrong, it makes them think I'm a sloppy researcher. And if I don't know what I'm talking about here with this family, maybe all the rest of my research is wrong too. And so we need to be a little bit more conscientious about how we're presenting the stuff that we do. So here are just some reasons why some of this stuff happens. My objective today is maybe just to jar you a little bit or open your eyes a little bit to ways in which some of this stuff occurs so that you'll be a little bit more conscious of it, so that you'll make smarter choices as you go building your family tree. So one of the ways in which errors occur in our tree is that information gets copied from someone else's tree without paying any attention. And I will freely admit that I have fallen prey to this. I don't copy information from other trees so much anymore, but when I first got started, I used to use printed or published family histories where I would just copy the information out of them into my fan. That information was not always accurate, and I'm still cleaning up some of those messes. I went ahead and made my tree public anyway, even with some of those errors, but just copying, looking into that research ourselves can cause some of those errors. And then this is a big one, and one that I am a really big fan of making sure we get all the records available. And if we've only looked at one or two records, we don't have the full story. And if we didn't analyze those records at all or correctly, then we may have entered the information incorrectly. So for example, his father's parents, if I had only looked at the 1930 census, I would have had the wrong person. The person listed on the 1930 census with that name, first husband's last name that he was using. And so that person with that name did not exist. if I hadn't kept looking and discovered a 1920 marriage record for somebody with the same first name and a different last name, if I hadn't discovered a 1918 death record for her first husband, I could have gone merrily on thinking this was the right person and wondered why I couldn't go back another generation, wondered why I kept hitting a brick wall there. Collect all the records you can about a person and make sure you're really analyzing them. That analyze step is a big deal. And maybe I'll do a future broadcast on some of the ways in which I do that, but don't just attach a record. Always, always, always look at the record first, and not just the index page, but the actual record itself. Now, let's talk about just some of the tools, and that's why we're here today. Talk about some of the tools available to you to clean up your online tree. Let's start with online trees, and then the next step is we'll look at cleaning up our family tree maker, but let's start with online. The first thing I'm going to recommend that you do, and this may seem a little counterintuitive in a digital world, but is to actually print out a family tree. For me, when I have something on paper in front of me, something tangible, sometimes it changes the way that I look at things. I grab a pen and I can start marking it up and making some notes to myself, and then that guides my research. So let me just show you where you can do that. When you're looking at your family tree, bring up whatever view you want here, but there's this publish button. Go ahead and click that publish button, and what I want to publish is a family tree poster. And I want to publish just a standard poster. Basically what I'm doing is I'm just printing, look at it. Now you can print up to 9 generations, which is a lot. 7, 8, and 9 generations is going to print portrait style paper, and then 5 and 6 generations is going to print landscape style. You decide what it is that you need for your family. I'm going to start with one of my great grandparents. I'm going to print a, excuse me, I'm going to print a pedigree chart, a 6-generation chart for him. It's going to take just a minute to create that. It's going to create it all fancy. I don't need it really all that fancy because I'm not having it printed by name on my wall in nice giant heavy paper. All I'm doing is putting it, let's just lighten up that background a little bit. All I'm going to do is just put this, print it out myself. And I'll make it a little bigger. You don't need to see the details. I'm just showing you this so you get an idea of what we're doing. I'm just going to then print on my printer this pedigree chart so that I can see here, this is my great-grandfather and his parents and grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great and great-great-great. So we've got all these generations, and I can view it. I can print it out, and I can have a pen in hand, information that I have. Now here's what I'm going to recommend that you look for. The first thing that I would do, and that I do, is compare dates and places. What you're looking for specifically are impossible scenarios. We all have them in our family tree. Somewhere you've made a mistake, or somewhere something's been copied incorrectly, and that's what you're looking for. Let me just give you a few ideas of what impossible scenarios I look for. I look for children who were born before their mother was born. That's an impossible scenario. I'm checking birth dates. I'm making sure they make sense. Not just impossible scenarios, but also illogical scenarios. Was the child born before the mother was years old? Was the child born over a year after the father died? Look for some of those things. I look for spouses who were born more than 100 years apart. Probably means I've incorrectly connected two people. Maybe I've connected a father to a daughter instead of a father to a spouse, or a father to a daughter-in-law. I've seen that. Actually, I saw that just in somebody's tree just a couple of days ago. So where you've connected things just means you may have made an inaccurate connection. And so pay attention to those kinds of things. And then, as I mentioned, look for some of those illogical scenarios. Things that, like children born in a place where the mother never lived. If the mother was born in England and married in England and died in England, the chance that she had a child born in Philadelphia, probably pretty illogical. Not impossible. I have an ancestor back in the 1600s who came to America, went back to England, had a few children there, came back to America. It's very well documented. So it's not impossible, but it's pretty illogical for the time period. Look for migration patterns, where people are living. Pay attention to that and see if things make sense or don't make sense. And then here is what I do. with this printed out pedigree chart, when I find things like that, I'll actually circle them, just red marker, something that'll stand out, and I'll circle it and maybe make a little note to myself about why this doesn't make sense. And then this piece of paper then becomes my research map. Here's one of the ways in which I focus. I look for some problems and then I try to go solve those problems. And sometimes those problems may be on a line of my family where I think, oh, this is so well documented, or so well, I may have done something inaccurate or copied something incorrectly. So that's how I use the publish feature on Ancestry.com to help me discover some of those errors. There are some other options. And we're going to close this window here. And then here you can also print out, you have the option to do not just ancestry posters or pedigree charts, but you can do descendancy posters. So for example, you can pick your great-grandfather and print a list of all of his descendants. And again, you're looking for things like, are the children in the right order? Do the birth dates and places make sense? Have I attached people correctly or not? Publish button under family tree posters. You do not have to pay for them. You don't have to order them. This is just if you want to print out a big fancy nice something you can hang on your wall, which you're more than welcome to do. But you can just print it on your printer at home and it serves the same purpose. So that's how that works. Now and skip generations. We talked about that, where you've incorrectly attached a father to a daughter-in-law, or in some way, you've got a 50-year gap or a 60-year gap between the parents and the child. Maybe you've missed a generation there. And so look for those three. And this, for me, is I spend actually far more time in Family Tree Maker. And there's a couple of reasons why. One is because it's so much more robust. Just by its nature, software is a lot more robust than an online program. And so I'm able to actually manipulate the data a little bit better to analyze it the way that I want to analyze it. The first way, of course, is there's actually a report that can be created called a data error report. In Family Tree Maker, if you click again on Publish, and there is going to be over here a person report and then a data error report. And when I go to create that report, let me just show you what most of those options are so that you have an idea. The first one is you're looking for anybody where their birth date is after their death date. Now, this only occurs to me once in a while, and it's, like I said, usually because I've typed 18 instead of 17. I get the centuries mixed up sometimes just when I'm typing in information. So it looks for that. It automatically will look for anybody whose birth date is after their parents' death date. So it's anybody who was born after their mother's death date and anybody who was born a year or more after their father's death date. That's just kind of the system limitation. Of course, we know people can be born up to 9 months after their father died. And so that's the way that it calculates that. It automatically looks for anybody whose birth date was after their father was age 80 or after their mother was age 60, and then before either of their parents were 13. So it'll create a list of people who fit into that category. You can also create a list of people whose burial date was before their death date, whose age at time of death was greater than 120. I may have one or two of those still floating in my tree unintentionally. And then people where any event date occurs before their birth date. So a marriage, a divorce, a child's birth, a death, any event in their life, a residence, a census before their birth date. It means you've got a problem. Again, either you've entered information incorrectly or you've copied information that was inaccurate. A marriage date after a death date, a marriage date after those are the kinds of things that this data error report is looking for. And you can do just a little bit at a time. So I can say, you know what, I want to look for every one of those errors across my entire database. Now I'm only interested in a list of people whose birth date is after their father's death date. So here's what I've created. I've created a list of that in my tree. And you'll see I have just over a page. I pay a lot of attention, but so some of these errors are errors that I inherited. When I inherited the family genealogy, I did not start over. I just took what was given to me and I have built on that. So here's Jane Beeman. She was born in 1866. Her father died in 1863. Obviously, there's a problem there. So what I've done in my notes, I haven't changed any of the dates. I haven't wiped them out because I want to do more research. And this alerts me that there's a problem here. So what I've done in the notes here for her father, you may notice, is I made a note that County, Ohio, and seen the cemetery where here is Julius Beeman, and it lists that he died on the 19th of September, 1863, on his tombstone. And I'm assuming that CW means that he died in the Civil War, which would make sense based on the date. There is a book that I have sourced and attached to him. It's published back in the 1890s, I believe, that says that he was married in 1865, had a daughter born in 1866, and that he died in 1866. I, unfortunately, when I went to Ohio, did not take a photo of that to see if I could find a copy of that photo of that tombstone, and was not able to find it. And so there's a couple of possibilities here. Either I incorrectly recorded this information, I was in Ohio, I wrote it down wrong, or I copied it wrong, or something. Or this Julius Beeman is a different Julius Beeman than the one who is the father of Jane. Or, right, like there's some options here. And so or maybe his tombstone really says he died in 1863. Maybe he really is the father of Jane. Maybe the tombstone itself is incorrect. So the tombstone was placed. Was it placed immediately after his death, or was it placed 30 years later by a member of his family, or by some Civil War group, or by some genealogical, by him, or by his family rather, shortly after his death, or was it placed years later? If it was placed years later, there's a very good possibility that they just got the year wrong, that the year is inactive, that I need to research this further. So the error comes up on my error report. I know here's a place research to figure out what's going on here, because clearly this cannot be accurate, right? So let me close that, and let's come back over. Maker will automatically look for you, and then what I do is I just print out that list and go through them one at a time, making notes about further research that I need to do, or just correcting obvious errors if I have documentation or notes and I've just typed something in inaccurately. Let's just talk finally today about ways to avoid the mess in the first place. The first thing I would recommend is only add people to your tree after you've researched to determine that the information is accurate. I know those exciting when you find somebody who appears to have done generations worth of research on a line of your family history. It's so tempting to just attach. And if you're going to do that, just that's great. I would recommend that you keep that tree private so that people don't keep copying mistakes. But I would also recommend that maybe you do that as a side project and keep another tree as your actual research, because otherwise how are you going to know what's truth and what's not truth? And like I said, my objective today was to jar you a little bit, or maybe to open your eyes a little bit to ways we can all be more responsible genealogists, more responsible keepers of the family tree. But also I would hope that you would want to be chasing your family. If you're climbing up a tree that has nothing to do with you, or that's made up of fictitious people, there's not a lot of pride to be had in that. So hopefully you'll just add people one at a time to your tree, and if you find them in other people's trees, that's great. But look at the documentation they've attached. If they haven't attached any documentation, go do the research yourself to determine if that information is accurate before you add those people to your family tree. If you're not using Family Tree Maker, I would encourage you to do so. One of the things that I love about Family Tree Maker, and there are many, many things I love about it, but one of the things that I love about Family Tree Maker is that anytime I try to enter illogical information, it flashes a little thing on the screen that says, this child was born before their mother. Oh, oops, I typed that wrong. It flags me and it says, this woman, you just entered her with the same last name as her husband. And I can either say, oh, yes, she was his first cousin. That's why they have the same last name. Or I can say, oh, oops, I automatically just did that. Let's remove that last name until I can discover the maiden name. So it actually just pops up a flag or makes a little sound anytime I try to enter illogical information. And then this is a big one, and it might be a new perspective for some of you, but it's something that I do. And it's one of the reasons why I think a lot of genealogists in particular have really great trees. It's because we've learned that we need to spend as much time analyzing our tree as we do growing our tree. Spend as much time looking at it, spend as much time thinking about it, mulling it over, spend as much time comparing information, spend as much time, like let me just share with you one last thing that I did today. I'm getting ready for today's presentation. I came in here to just walk through this publish feature so that I made sure it was working correctly when I showed it to you today. And I came back on this Park line, right? This John Park, born in 1677. And I look over here, and I just happen to notice that his father, Roger, was born in 1664. That means that his father was only 13 years old when he was born. I don't think that that's accurate. Okay, so then I thought for a while, like I didn't just jump right in and make changes or jump right in and start doing research. I didn't jump right in. And so I realized not only do I have a problem here, right, which required me to pay attention, but I also realized that I don't have any documentation on this. This is information that I copied into my family tree. I was probably 16 or 17 years old when I did this. It was a published book of Park family history, and I copied it out of that book. And so that's my tree. And so now what I'm thinking is, I'm trying to think through all the different scenarios. Okay, if Roger really is John's father, maybe Roger's birth date is inaccurate. Maybe he's actually a generation. Well, Roger's father was born in 1638. Roger was born in 1664. That seems more likely. So maybe he was born later than that. Well, I look at his son. His son was born in 1758. Well, his son was born in 1709. So he would have been, 32. So he could have been born a little. His father. These are the kinds of things that I'm doing, and that may seem really tedious to some of you, but I like to think through all the possible scenarios before I dive in and just start trying to solve the problem, because that makes me more open to what it is that I might discover. And so now that I have a list of all the different scenarios, and I keep a little notebook where I write all my little notes, now that I have a list of all the different possible scenarios for solving this problem or for what the real solution might be, now I can start making a list of ways to solve the problem. What kinds of records do I need to go look at? He was supposedly born in New Jersey. He was supposedly born in England and migrated to New Jersey with colonial New Jersey and the records available there and what's not available. And so I start making a list of all relationship problem. It could be a relationship problem where I end up finding out that John's parents are an entirely different couple. It could be just a problem with the dates that I have. All the possible ways in which it might be inaccurate, and I've identified ways in which I can solve that problem. That's a process that I go through. And somebody asks me, how do I focus, or how do I keep from being all over the place in my family tree? Well, for me, it's because I spend this time looking at my tree and thinking about those connections and paying attention to the dates and the places and figuring out ways in which I can clean up information or put in more accurate information. An approximate birth year without any other information to me is insufficient. I want to know more. And so the more I find out about that person, the more accurate my information is likely to be. That's all questions. You can email me at ask@ancestry.com. We are putting together the February calendar, so if you've got a topic you'd like discussed, please let me know at that email address. If you have missed his presentations, you can watch them on our YouTube channel. The URL is there on your screen. And please check our Facebook page for future dates and presentations. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.